It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast, breaking down for you the Australian property market. And if you have decided to pull the trigger and sell your property this year, and maybe you're struggling with who to choose to make that happen, don't forget we've got this curated real estate agency list as well as real estate agents across Australia. We are not a real estate company. We don't sell real estate. We help you understand it better. Even if you already have an idea on who you would like to use to sell your property, send us an email and we can recommend somebody in your area. You can add them onto the interview process. It's free and you may very well connect with somebody you hadn't considered. Our email address, as always, is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. It is a Tuesday, February the 3rd, an important day today. Back in 2004, Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook. Actually, the domain name was thefacebook.com. Facebook now actually feels like the digital version of a dusty filing cabinet. 10 years ago, people literally lived on it. Now it's where you accidentally see a school acquaintance from time to time. Instagram and TikTok have taken over the lead, no doubt about that. Social media AI is going to be the death of us. And on that bright note, let's take you to Walkerville in Adelaide for the first time in 2026. And waiting patiently is Fadi Oudih, who is the sales director of Boffo Real Estate. Welcome on to the Real Estate Breakfast. First question, got to ask, are you a Facebooker or Instagram user?
Well, good morning, Craig. Very pleased to be here. And look, we advertise on both, but I agree with your comments. Facebook is a bit of an older demographic and Instagram is probably where we put a bit more emphasis these days. I think that's where the market is, but certainly we're on both platforms.
Yeah, it's almost like Facebook is a little bit old-fashioned now, and the shiny ones are Instagram and TikTok. Well, Walkerville, let's talk about your local area. It's approximately 4 to 5 k's northeast of the Adelaide CBD. I think roughly about a 10-minute drive. Very, very prestigious where you're working and operating. It's the Leafy Enclave. Tell us a little bit more about this, because you've got that school, St Andrews, which is pretty popular.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful suburb. We're very, very fortunate to be working in such a beautiful suburb, but it's positioned right in between the heart of the CBD, and then you've got Linear Park at your doorstep. In addition to that, you've got some of Adelaide's best schools. You've got St Andrews Primary School, you've got Wilderness, you've got Prince Alfred College, St Peter's College, so you can take your pick. And that's one of the main draw cards that people really like this area.
Let's have a look at the affordability factor, because what's interesting right now is that affordable unit buying in Adelaide isn't just a go north story anymore. You've got genuine options spread across the city, which is a big shift in how first home buyers are approaching location versus price.
100%. People are really focused on just finding a nice little suburb. I mean, if they can't get the house in the suburb they want, they're looking for a 2-bedroom unit. If they can't get the 2-bedroom unit, they're even open-minded enough now that they're looking at a 1-bedroom unit. You go back 5 years ago, that certainly wasn't the case prior to COVID. Things have really shifted and mindsets have changed.
Yeah, it won't be long before the preference is a studio, even smaller than a one-bedder. Let's have a look at the median property prices there in Walkerville. First off, to the houses we go. Just over 2,080,000. This is the median price. Over the last 12 months, some pretty decent growth there, almost 16%. And you've got the median on the unit price.
The median's approximately 650,000 is what we're finding. And it really depends on whether it's a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom. There is a lot of that data skewed towards the old Transport SA building, which was converted from an office building into a residential complex. So they've got 1 bedroom, they've got studios, so that can influence the median sale price depending on how many of those have sold in the area. But typically you will find some of those 70s charming colonial style single level, which appeal to your downsizers more so.
Yeah, and the growth, it should be mentioned, on the unit market where you are, 21.7%. So that is pretty reasonable in the last 12 months. Looking at the numbers, just sort of drilling down on Salisbury Downs is the cheapest location when buying a unit, just over 400 grand. But places like Tonsley and Bedford Park aren't far behind. Buyers are clearly prioritising lifestyle and convenience, not just the cheapest postcodes anymore.
Correct. And the other thing is proximity to public transport. You've got the Tonsley redevelopment, you've got the South Road upgrade. So I think that's going to be appealing to a lot of lifestyle people, but also investors that have done their research and understand that with that easier access comes lower commutes, and hence it's going to drive demand.
Different story, isn't it, when it comes to houses? The cheapest houses are still overwhelmingly in the north. And even then, you're basically starting well above the 500k mark. That gap between units and houses is pushing more buyers to rethink what getting into the market actually looks like when buying a property with a bit of land.
It's almost becoming unattainable for first home buyers. To get something with a bit of land is really, really challenging now, because anything that's got a bit of land, we're finding the developers are just coming out in hordes and really pushing up the price. Everything with a bit of land that I'm selling that's going to auction, we're finding that if there's 10 registered bidders, 8 of those are going to be investors compared to 2, which will be first home buyers, unfortunately. They are really sort of having to be forced to look at different options, which would be your apartments and your community title properties.
We are talking to Fadi there in Adelaide from the suburb of Walkerville. When we come back, well, we've got to talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is the RBA. They are meeting later on this afternoon, and we'll also talk about those downsizes. That is up next.
We are more than just a real estate podcast. We cover a multitude of subjects, including property data, current buyer-seller sentiment, and the mood of the market. Follow each week all of the main talking points and know your property.
Good morning to you, Danny. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. A waterfront home in Rose Bay fetched around $55 million. It is a suburb record. When there are these massive sale prices, when they happen, it does reshape expectations from vendors who suddenly say, wow, my house is worth XYZ, which ain't exactly how it works, of course.
And it's interesting when a sale like that does happen, you know, you get the neighbours or the neighbours in the other streets and they, if that sold for this, my house is on bigger land. I can see the top of centre point. They could only see the bottom of centre point. It does sort of change a vendor's perception. And then I guess you've got to get onto that educating stage and go through the notions on why it's sold for that and why your home, you know, is perceived at this price. But it happens in every suburb. It happened in Bondi a couple of years ago. A semi sold for 6.7. All of a sudden, everyone in the street was then saying, mine must be worth that. And so, fair point.
Unlock the secrets of real estate and stay informed about the latest real estate buzz with hot market trends, emerging suburbs, and hidden gems.
It is a Real Estate Tuesday. Yes, as I mentioned, we've got this decision. I'm going to tell you in just a moment what the economists are thinking when it comes to the cash rate today. And I'll tell you this much, they are split on where they think it might drop. Now, we're talking to Fadi, and he is in South Australia. You're also seeing behaviour change in your market. Home buyers want affordability when it comes to the units which we've talked about. Downsizes, they are adding to the competition. They're sort of fueling that along, and more buyers are getting more comfortable with off-plan purchases. It's a quieter shift, but it is reshaping Adelaide's unit market. So just on terms of, buying off plan, how much have you been seeing of that lately?
Again, if you go back 5 years ago, selling something off the plan was a really challenging task. Today, people are sort of considering settlement's going to be in a year to 2 years' time where they'll have to come up with the money, and then they're factoring in the growth. And they're saying, well, I can potentially secure a property without having to pay for it whilst gaining that 5 to 10% growth, pending how it goes, of course, before I even pay for it. And for people looking to downsize, sometimes it's a really good opportunity for them because they can get their ducks in a row, they can clear out the house without the pressure and then put their house on the market and time it accordingly to when they're going to take the keys for their off-plan purchase.
Yeah, no, very well spotted, because that seems to be what is happening in your market. So long as you're doing your due diligence, make sure that the developer is of sound reputation. Do a lot of digging around that. Now, as mentioned, the RBA is meeting later on this afternoon to decide on the cash rate. Economists are currently split, some including the Commonwealth Bank and the NAB forecasts. They're now saying that the RBA lifting the cash rate by 25 basis points in February to address persistent inflation and strong economic momentum. Others are suggesting that the bank may hold rates steady, waiting for clear inflation data before moving. How much does that affect the prestige market in Walkerville? Because I would imagine you've got a lot of cashed up potentially buyers that are transacting in and around your area.
Correct. Yeah. Look, if it's a premium home, sort of circa 3 million, 4 million, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact. Those prize properties, when they appear, they're highly sought after, and that small marginal increase isn't really going to deter people because it might be waiting another year before that property presents itself again in such a exclusive pocket.
So you're looking forward to this year and what lays ahead for you in your area?
It'll be an interesting year for sure. I think it's largely going to be dependent on what happens with this inflation data and how it moves forward. But we're still finding a lot of buyers, and that's investors, downsizers, first home buyers across the whole spectrum out in force. I mean, we've already launched 7 properties, and every single property's had multiple offers after the first 2 open inspections.
You got a reasonable team there. Anybody you want to single out in your team in Adelaide?
Oh, look, we all do a good job here, so well done to all the Boffo team, and especially our property management team. They often don't get the recognition that a lot of the sales reps do. They do a sensational job, so I'd have to say thank you to our property management team.
Fadi, great to catch up with you there in Walkerville. All the best for 2026. Let's see what the RBA does later on this afternoon. Just a reminder too, if you're not already following us, do that, because the second that information drops, we will be with Anthony Landau this afternoon reporting on that. So that is the best way to get the information. Enjoy your Tuesday, Fadi, and great to have that conversation all about Walkerville this morning.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate your time.
Listen to expert perspectives with exclusive real estate conversations and supercharge your knowledge base with us.
If investors see that everyone has moved away, they might decide to sell and take their capital and reinvest elsewhere, where we might see some more stock coming to market.
Yeah, just coming back to the gurus, there will be some people listening, Nikki, thinking, how can I become an investor guru? What sort of qualifications do you need?
Look, I'm sure they have qualifications, and they have a large following on social media where they share a lot of information. Sometimes, of course, we find that buyer's agents become like online investor gurus and really explaining where to go and where to purchase, which could, in my opinion, really affect some strong investor groups going to certain areas and dominating those markets and seeing prices increase.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.